So my story is probably going to be the least name-dropping of them all tonight, but it holds a lot of personal miracles for me. So it's 1995. I live in Moscow. I'm a student in my second year in college. I'm a poor student. I barely make ends meet. Suddenly Elton John, that I love, decides to come to Moscow with his tour and with his new album. And I know that I absolutely have to go, except I can't afford the ticket because it costs at least $200. Because Elton John plays the biggest, fanciest venue. It's Kremlin. It's the Kremlin Conference Palace, so-called. It was built for all these communists, for all these Communist Party meetings in the old times, so all these people could, meet in fancy atmosphere. But anyways, so when they announce his arrival, of course they start running all kinds of radio competitions. And I call every radio station, I get put on hold, and I spend like days and days doing this, forgetting about my homework, falling behind at college, and absolutely failing at everything. So the day of the show, I wake up so depressed, and I'm like, what? Don't I get to see Elton John? I just cannot, be at peace with that. I have to absolutely do something, but I just don't know what. So 2 hours before the show, some weird force, kicks me off the couch, makes me put my makeup on, get dressed, take a train towards the Kremlin Conference Palace. And I'm like, what am I going to do there? Am I going to try and sneak into it or what? I don't know, jump the fence? Like what? Am I kidding myself? What's wrong with me? And when I'm on the train, I see these 2 girls sitting next to each other, and one of them says, I have to tell you something. My boyfriend proposed to me, and he's going to meet us at the show, at Elton John's show. And I didn't say yes just yet, and I told him if Elton John plays my favorite song, Sacrifice, at the show, I will say yes. And her friend is like, dude, are you crazy? Like, who makes any judgments based on that? Like, that's how I decided it for me in my heart. And I'm like, okay, this woman is even crazier than I. So finally I arrived to the outside of the Kremlin Palace. There are all these people dressed up, super fancy, and I feel like I'm looking poor compared to all of them. And they just make circles, around the box office, around the Kremlin, and thinking to myself, what's my fucking problem? I'm not going to get in. There is no chance in the world. And at some point, I almost give up, and I kind of just sit down on a bench, looking all depressed, and almost start crying, when I see a young man looking at me from the distance. And I look back at him, wondering, like, what's happening? So he comes up to me, and he says, you look like you really want to go to a show, but you can't afford it. And I'm like, damn, he knows the story. And I'm like, yes. And he's like, would you like to come with me? We're like, what? And I'm like, how much is it going to cost me? He's like, nothing. It's my birthday, and my aunt works at this establishment. She's a bartender, so she always gives me 2 free tickets. And this time I had nobody to bring with me, so you can come with me if you want. And I'm like, what? So I'm like, oh my God, yes, please, let's go. So I literally ran ahead of him, and then I realized I didn't introduce myself and didn't ask his name. So we introduce ourselves to each other, and then we get in, and he's like, I can tell you really want this, so it's my gift to me for my birthday. And I'm like, oh, this is the best thing in my life that ever happened to me. Like, seriously, I tell him, and he's like, well, I'm happy. So, but his tickets are free, of course, and they're towards the back of the room. So the stage is very small. I mean, it's still much better than what I imagined. So I'm like, I don't even care. I really want to, I just want to see and listen. And of course, the show is amazing, except at some point, Elton John stops the show and he said, I really don't like it that all the VIP section is taken by these rich people who don't dance and who are not even interested. Please, security guards, let the public, let the simple people get towards the stage and dance. And the security guards are like, no, this is a risk to your own security. And Elton John says, no, please, I ask you to do it. This is my request. So security guards have to say, okay, go. So we all run towards the stage, and my new friend tells me, don't worry about it, run. So of course I run, and I managed to get real close, probably Elton John in this door, and I am this door. So, and I'm like, dancing and jumping, and when I look around, I see all these rich Russian millionaires and all these rich Russian, VIP persons, famous singers, who still don't dance and they don't get up and they all look too fancy and serious. They all came to the show to just, to show everybody they're fancy. But I keep dancing and singing, and I'm completely going out of control. And suddenly Elton John starts playing Sacrifice, and I'm like, oh my God, this girl is probably going to say yes to her boyfriend. So I look to the left, I look to the right, and then here we go. I see her, I see him, and she stands there with flowers, and he kind of holds her hand, and suddenly she just hugs him real tight and whispers something in his ear, and he goes, ah! So I guess she said yes. So I'm like, wow, this is like miracle 2 of the night. But that was not the last miracle that happened to me that week. So I come home, and I come home to my poor apartment that I was renting, the worst apartment ever, and but it was super cheap, so I didn't care. And right before I went to the Kremlin, hoping to get into the show, my fridge broke. So I put all my frozen foods into cold water in a bathtub. So when I came home, I realized that actually there was a huge hole in that bathtub and all the water ended up on the floor. So just from all this excitement, I come back to something very mundane and kind of tragic, because I realized that probably all the water went 2 levels down, and probably, my neighbors below are flooded, and I'm like, oh shit, I don't have any money. How am I going to pay for that? So I'm starting to collect all the water and cry, because this evening was amazing and now it's shit. And then I turn on the radio, and of course they play Elton John because he's in Moscow, so I blast Elton John, I cry, I wipe the floors, I throw away frozen foods because they now stink. So it's and I'm thinking, oh damn, I guess you always have to pay for amazing with the mundane. So I'm next morning I expect, an angry note from my neighbors saying you owe us thousands of dollars because you ruined our ceilings. But there is nothing. So the whole week I come home, trying, to walk by their door quietly, and I don't pick up the phone when it rings. But 3 days later, actually the lady grabs me at the stairs and she's like, hey, you're our neighbor from upstairs, right? Yes. So I'm oh God, here's the moment. And she's like, were you playing Elton John the other day, really late at night? I'm like, yeah, sorry. She's like, it's okay, we really love Elton, but please don't play anything that late at night because we can hear really well. And I'm like, okay, now she's going to tell me I owe thousands of dollars. And suddenly she tells me, by the way, thank you so much for flooding us. And I'm like, what? And she's like, yeah, I was telling my husband for 2 years we need to retile the restroom and redo the ceiling in the restroom. But now that you flooded us, I got what I wanted. Thank you so much. And that was my Elton John's miracle number 3. Thank you.